Hello, everybody. Welcome back to MasterAdvisor. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today is May 18th, 2023. This is episode number 71. We're going to be talking about protecting the client's investment today. It's a tough topic, mainly because there's going to be a lot of conversation specifically about travel insurance. But we have a great travel advisor here who's going to help guide us through the conversation the next 45, 50 minutes or so. But first, as always, I just want to make a few housekeeping reminders. The first is that if you're new here, and we're really thrilled that every week we're getting first timers on every one of these episodes, go ahead and switch into speaker view on the Zoom. That's going to give you the best viewing experience. The second is that the chat on the bottom right is going to be open. It's open now. It's going to be open throughout the next 45, 50 minutes. We like to grab as many questions and comments as we can through the chat, make this as interactive as possible. So please, if you have something relevant to say, go ahead and drop it in there, and we'll do our best to grab it as we go along through this conversation. Also, for everyone who came out a couple of weeks ago to talk about expedition cruising, it's really nice to have you back today. And I just want to have a gentle reminder, if you want to rewatch it, or if you're one of the advisors who missed that, you can catch it on our YouTube page, which is the host to all of our audio and our video content. That page will host today's session sometime later in the afternoon. So if you want to rewatch it, you can catch it there as well. We just dropped the link to the subscription to that channel in the chat now. If you like the content, you can go ahead and subscribe. You'll be able to catch all of our new updates, and you'll also be able to help us continue to grow this community. All those interactions really help us a lot. I also want to announce that we're going to be back here in 2 weeks, talk about working with and onboarding new clients. That's another one we're really excited about. You can register for that one right now. We just, again, dropped that link in the chat. That's a really great topic with something we really haven't done yet. We have more advisors lined up who we're really happy have volunteered their time to help us out with that too. So we're really excited about that. Hope to see you there as well. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and introduce the sponsor for today's session, Apple Leisure Group Vacations. We're really happy to welcome Nick Ziamoris today to walk us through a little bit of the topic and to give us a little introduction.
Great, thank you guys. Hey, I'm Nick Ziamoris, as Daniel mentioned, and I'm the Business Development Manager for ALG Vacations. My territory is New England and upstate New York. So I'm really happy to be here today to introduce this topic. It's a very important topic to us, and I wanted to thank you guys for kind of bringing all this great information to all the travel advisors that you guys bring every few weeks and every time you have one of these sessions. So it's much appreciated. But moving on to travel protection. So we all know how important travel protection is, right? Especially what's happened in the world the last few years and everything else. And ALGV's travel protection is an excellent plan. Great benefits. It's a cancel for any reason plan. It includes hurricane protection, trip interruption, trip delay, lost or stolen or delayed baggage. Of course, covers the travel accidents while on the trip for the clients. But one thing that I always find when I talk to my agents that one of the benefits that they tend to forget about with our travel protection is the price guarantee. The fact that we offer price protection to the clients when they purchase our Travel Protection Plus. So with that being said, if our rate goes down on the hotel portion of an FIT trip or on the whole rate of one of our ENVF exclusive nonstop vacation flights, we will give the clients the lower rate. You just need to let us know that. It's been valid on Mexico, Caribbean, Central America, Hawaii vacations, and we recently added Europe, making the best price guarantee valid on Europe. Europe is such a big focus for our company right now. And as you know, everyone wants to go to Europe, such a busy destination. So this really just allows the clients to lock in their trip early and have that assurance that if the price goes down, that they get the lower rate. It's especially important with destinations like Europe, where travelers are booking so much farther out. So what was one thing that you guys can remember about our travel protection? I'm sure you remember the things that I talked about, that cancel for any reason and everything else, but please do remember that to give your clients that assurance with our price guarantee to make sure that they're locking in their trip early and booking early to make sure they get the best rates and the hotels and airfare that they would like to have for their trip. So that's what I had for you today. Daniel, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I think I'm introducing Heather DiPietro today. So Heather, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Again, we really appreciate your partnership and you being here on the call. And yeah, like you mentioned, Heather DiPietro from Travel Sales Group is going to be our guest today. Heather is a previous guest on this program. We're very, very happy to have her back. It's a very new topic, but I first want to thank you, Heather, for joining us and lending us your time today too.
Of course. Thanks very much. And thanks, Nick, for the intro. Great to be back. I'm always happy to be with you guys.
Yeah. So our topic today is going to be protecting a client's investment. I know we're gonna talk a lot about travel insurance. One thing I want to point out is that a lot of the things we talk about will be specific to policies, to companies, to suppliers. So we're going to do our best to navigate this conversation as best we can. But I know, Heather, like I mentioned, you were a previous guest, but I know we have a lot of new advisors on the call. You could just take a couple minutes to introduce yourself and to give us sort of a little intro to you and for the rest of the advisors on the call today.
Sure. I've been in the business for about 17 years. I mean, obviously, I started when I was 12. But I started as an advisor for about 7 years of that. And then I've owned my own company for about 10 years now. And shameless plug, we also started just about 5 months ago, our own escorted luxury travel experience company with a focus on solo female travelers. So that's called She's the World. So we're very proud of that. So yeah, I now have 2 businesses that we're running and very busy, and like everyone else, the big focus on Europe, and we do a lot of group business. So very, very varied experience.
Yeah, and I know the last time you were here, you spoke about bachelor and bachelorette parties, and I know you do a lot of destination weddings. Hopefully we can talk about that as we go along through today. Before we get into that specific topic, I just want to get a sense of what's happening. I was hoping, Heather, you can give us a little bit of an insight into the demand is trending for your clients. Is there anything new, anything happening, any new destinations that are driving sales or even just driving conversations?
Like Nick kind of alluded to, Europe is very hot right now. That's definitely big. Coming out of the pandemic, I think that small groups, especially small family groups, are definitely a big thing. Solo travel, a really crazy number that a lot of people are not focused on. It's one of the reasons that we launched the business that we did. Solo travel is up 780% since 2020. So that is huge. But those small groups, I think, came out of COVID because a lot of people didn't get to see their families for a year and a half or 2 years when we were doing the resting in place thing. So they came out of that, and these groups that didn't get to see each other, instead of grandma and grandpa going on vacation by themselves, or small family groups like mom and dad and the kids going, now they're all going together. So we're seeing a lot of that. Instead of there being a family of 4 going, now it's a family of 6 or 8 or 12. So we're seeing a lot of that. Everybody that I'm talking to is seeing a higher demand than we've seen in probably at least the 10 years since I've owned my own agency. It's the highest demand we've ever had. We're setting records in sales. So, and everyone I know is seeing the same thing. All the agency owners that I chat with are working 12, 14-hour days.
Yeah, so I promise this is the last question before we get into the topic, but that solo traveler stat is like staggering to me. I'm curious, who are these solo travelers? Or do they fall into any kind of demographic, or are they sort of spread across your client types?
They are spread across client types, but I will tell you that out of that, and that number is staggering, that percentage makes up 83 million people. And out of that 83 million people that are considering a solo tour, and those numbers are from last year, that's 2022, 83 million people traveled. And this year, that number is even bigger. They don't have the exact stats, but it's even bigger. And 84% of them are women.
Oh my God.
So, and the average age is 47.
That is, I know there was always a lot of talk about solo travelers. At one point, a few years ago, it seemed like a brand new thing, but it is nice to hear it really manifests itself with an agent
Yeah.
like yourself. Yeah. All right, so let's get into the topic, which is protecting a client's investment. And I know, like I mentioned, a lot of this conversation is going to be centered around travel insurance. And Heather, when we were talking earlier in the week, we kind of bantered back and forth about this is sometimes seen as a dry or a boring topic. I was curious if you could give us sort of why you think insurance has a reputation for being that kind of boring product.
Yeah, it's not very sexy, I don't think, but it is definitely important. I think it's people just kind of see it as maybe before the pandemic, they saw it as okay, we don't need that. We're going on vacation. My credit card protects me for this or protects me for that. And they didn't see it as necessary. And since 2020, all of a sudden now it's a really important topic. And it is something that even when we don't suggest it, and to be honest, our agency, we send out a quote for every single trip. It is a part of our checklist. It goes out for every single trip. But even when we didn't do that, our clients ask about it now. So if they don't realize that we're going to send it for every trip, it's part of the conversation when we're discussing the trip cost with the client. They're saying, is travel insurance included in that price? So I think it is a major topic of conversation. It's important, even if it's not sexy. So I'm really glad that you brought this topic up, because I think especially new advisors need to know more about, the legality of it if you don't bring it up with your clients.
Yeah, and hopefully that's something we can talk a little. Again, I know that's another typical issue to talk about legal stuff, but hopefully we can touch on that as we go along today. Another thing we mentioned to each other earlier in the week that I understand it's a very, very vast sort of segment, travel insurance, and it can sometimes be difficult for advisors to get a good handle on it. Is that the kind of experience you have, not only with yourself, but with your network of colleagues in the industry?
It definitely is. I belong to several organizations within the travel industry. I'm a member of Allies, and I'm also in Female Leaders, and I sit on a couple of different boards, including, ALGV and Affluent Traveler. These are things that we discuss in all of those. Insurance and travel protection and things like that. Like I said, it's an important topic of conversation, and these things are constantly changing and constantly evolving, and what you need coverage for, and that you have to stay on top of it. So having those conversations and constantly educating yourself and constantly going in and looking, even today, to make sure that I wasn't giving any misinformation, I was contacting these different insurance providers that are our preferred vendors and saying, hey, I just wanted to verify that this information is correct before I go on and talk to these hundreds of advisors and make sure that I'm giving correct information. Because just when you think that what you know is correct, it changes, because it's an industry that is constantly evolving. So make sure that you're not misspeaking before you give information to your clients. And we talked the other day, and I said, my preferred vendor, and everyone has a different one. So please, anybody that's watching this, just because it's my preferred vendor doesn't mean it's going to be yours. Do your research and have your preferred vendor. My preferred vendor, when I'm doing something that isn't with ALG, when it's with ALG, they have a great insurance product that I just add on to that package. But if I'm doing something that's, say, multiple little pieces that have to be put together, I use Travel Insured. So if I'm using that vendor, make sure that you're keeping up and just double checking. And I have verbiage that I use with my clients. So if they're asking me specific questions about that coverage, I am not legally allowed to discuss specific coverage because I am not a legally licensed insurance broker. So I need to put you in touch with a legally licensed insurance broker to have that discussion. And then I give them the number, or I put them in touch with an agent. So many times you can make that phone call and put them in touch with the agent instead of just giving them an 800 number. That gives it a more personal touch rather than just saying, here, I don't deal with that. Here's an 800 number. Make the call to the 800 number with them on the phone, and then you can hop off the call once you've connected them. That gives it that little bit more of a personal touch. But don't necessarily have the conversation with them about what the coverage is, because you don't know insurance, you know travel. Put them in touch with the person that knows the insurance. And know which insurance is the best fit for your client.
Yeah. So I've gotten a lot of, I've spoken to a lot of advisors about insurance. I've spoken to insurance providers, and there just seems to be such a wide range of products offered. The advice I got from a couple of insurance providers was that a lot of advisors will try to learn frontwards and backwards a couple of plans that they could start pitching to the clients, that they can start talking about or fitting whatever is most appropriate. And that's what I was hoping we get to start talking about right now. You mentioned sometimes you'll book insurance through a supplier, like you mentioned ALGV, and sometimes you'll use Travel Insured, which is your preferred supplier. What are the typical situations where you think, for you, is a better fit to use Travel Insured? Is it more complicated trips? Is it trips with more components? Is there something else?
Yeah. It's like if I'm booking an all-inclusive vacation and it's somebody that, ALGV carries, and I'm doing that package with my transfers through Amstar, and that's a no-brainer. They have a cancel for any reason plan, whether it's the voucher plan or the cash back. I can add that. Even if my client doesn't want to purchase it at the time and then they want to add it, within 7 days after you've purchased that, you can still add it as long as you haven't made your final payment. And even after that, if they don't want the cancel protection and they still want to add a protection that's for during travel, in case they lose their bags or in case they have an accident while they're traveling or trip interruption, you can still add a plan with them. So I will use their protection for that. If I'm doing something that's, say, a multi-stop trip and I'm using a really small vendor, and I have, I'm booking something through like tours with locals or something like that, that's way more complicated, or that I want a really small, another trend that we're seeing in the industry is very customized. So if I'm booking a very private tour with a vineyard in Italy that isn't offered through any vendor supplier, and I'm booking direct through a vineyard, obviously I can't book, ALG's insurance for that. That's something that I would use Travel Insured for. Or if I'm booking a river cruise, I'm going to use the cruise line's insurance most of the time, because then it's going to cover it. But if I'm not booking the airline or the airfare through that, and I'm booking that separately and then booking an excursion separately instead of what the cruise line is offering, they want a completely separate excursion. So I'm booking that through somebody else and I'm booking the cruise. That's 3 separate components now. If I'm doing that, I need to book it through Travel Insured so that the whole package is going to be covered. Okay. So you kind of need to know which one is going to be the best fit for your client. If the vendor that you're booking with has great insurance to cover what you're doing, why make more work for yourself? You just want to book it with that and make sure that your client is covered. If it covers your client and makes it easier for you, make it easier for yourself and for your client.
Yeah. So you mentioned you have to know which one's best, and I assume this just comes from experience, but how do you gain that knowledge to know which is a better fit? I mean, is it just by gaining experience, both selling the travel insurance, using it yourself, and talking to suppliers? Is that sort of how your knowledge came about?
Yeah, we have an expression and a hashtag even with myself and my agents, and that's never stop learning. Okay. I don't think I will ever get old enough or experienced enough that I'm at the point where I'm like, nope, I know everything, I'm good. You never stop educating yourself. You never stop learning. You need to spend the time, set aside an hour, even if it's 2 hours a week, to do another webinar, to talk to suppliers, to whatever you need to do. Just constantly keep learning, constantly keep educating. You need to stay up with that. If in our agency, we're going to establish a once a month with one vendor where we have an hour or 2 hours that we invite a vendor in to have a meeting with our agents and tell us what's new. I think if your agency doesn't have that, then set it up so that you're doing a webinar, something like what we're doing right now. I guarantee newer agents will pick up some tidbit from this that they didn't know. I still do these, like the one that you just talked about for 2 weeks from now, I will sign up to do that one. So it's because onboarding is one of those things that I need to help to learn how to do that better. So we obviously do that. I have 5 agents who work for me, but I know that I can streamline that process. So doing these types of things is always going to help you to do things better, faster, easier. That's what you need to do. Constantly educate yourself. And the other thing is networking. I learned so much from talking with other agents. When we talked the other day, I said that when we do these Zoom meetings with other members of these organizations that I belong to, I learn a ton from these other women and from these other men that own agencies. Talking to them and learning, I used this system, or I used this CRM, or I use this insurance agency for this, or I use this vendor for that, is a great source of information. We need to share with one another. Yes, we're competitors, but there's plenty of clients out there that we can learn from one another. And when we do that, we elevate the industry as a whole.
Yep. Yeah. And I appreciate we will be back here 2 weeks, just to mention again what Heather went off. We will be back here with 2 weeks talking about onboarding clients and talking about networking. If anyone does have a question over the net, we have about 24 minutes left. So if anyone does have a question for Heather, for me, or for Nick, who's I think is still hanging around, you can drop them in the chat and hopefully we'll get them answered. All right. So a couple of things you mentioned during this conversation, Heather. You mentioned bags and some other stuff that I know some consumers would be surprised about when they realize that travel insurance can cover this kind of stuff. I was hoping we can talk a little bit about that, the things that travel insurance can cover that clients might not necessarily be fully familiar with right now.
Sure. We ran into each other, perfect example, at the ASTA River Cruise Expo. And the airline was kind enough to lose my bag on the way there. And I was speaking at the expo and had what I had on my back. That was it. I broke my own rule and did not bring an extra set of clothes. And 2 days in, I had to be on a panel and speak. And because I have an annual plan through Travel Insured, I was able to go on a $750 shopping spree and go and get myself clothes, shoes, toiletries, because that's one of the things that covers. If they lose your bag or they delay your bag, either one is covered. And I know that ALG has that same coverage in their travel protection. So it's in almost every travel protection out there. If they lose your bag for at least 24 hours, you have travel protection that kicks in so that you can buy yourself those things when you're traveling. Because it is the worst feeling in the world. I speak from personal experience, to get somewhere and realize I have no toothpaste, I have no deodorant, I have no anything. So the clothes that you travel in are not the clothes that you need to get up on a panel and speak in front of 700 travel agents. So it definitely is one of those things that is great to have. It's also, everyone knows the nightmare that is flights right now. There have been so many delays, so many interruptions, and a trip interruption, I think most of the agents know what that is, but is when you get, if I'm flying Charlotte to Miami to Antigua and my connection gets missed because my flight from Charlotte to Miami was delayed, and now I get to Antigua get to Miami and my flight to Antigua I just missed. That's a trip delay. Yeah. So it covers you for that hotel that you now have to stay in. So the airline will usually protect you, but if it's because of weather, they don't have to protect you. So that's when your travel protection kicks in. So now your hotel, instead of you having to sleep in a chair in the airport, your travel protection is going to cover your hotel for that night. So, and it's going to cover your meals for that night. So those are all the things that if you have that annual plan yourself, which is very reasonable, by the way, I think I pay like $149 or something like that for an annual plan. So if you don't have one, that's a big tip for any travel advisor that doesn't have them. They are well worth the money. I've already used it twice this year, so well worth it.
Yeah, I have had that experience of sleeping in an airport, and it would be well worth $149 to avoid that ever again. So
Yes.
yeah, and then like you mentioned, I know COVID sort of brought on this dawn of consumers realizing they need travel insurance, and the COVID concerns have obviously faded a little bit, but it is still nice to hear that there's still a high demand for travel insurance because things can go wrong very easily, whether it's losing your baggage or bad weather seems to happen often now. So it is good to hear that consumers are still realizing how important it is to buy insurance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it also proved the value of a travel advisor. We all of a sudden people realized they needed us again during COVID. So it was great.
Yeah. All right. So you spoke a little bit, you touched on regulations and things like this, and I know it's going to be impossible to get to specific regulations today, and I don't think that's really our role. But I do want to talk a little bit about advisors needing to know about these kind of regulations, whether it's state by state, things like that. And I was hoping you could touch a little bit on that. How tricky can state regulations make things here in the US? And I know it's the same province by province in Canada, especially for an advisor who maybe is serving clients that aren't living anywhere near where they're stationed.
I honestly, one of the reasons that I use the preferred supplier that I do is because they don't require me to have a certification for each state that I have agents in. But there are suppliers that do. So it really depends on how many agents that you have, or if you are a singular independent contractor. They vary state to state. And we talked a little bit about how a lot of agents or advisors will have one or two plans that they get very well versed in, and they just sell those two plans or focus on those two plans. And I definitely do that. I have those two that I kind of know really well with my preferred supplier. But I will tell you, they don't sell those in like New York and in Colorado, and they have a different version. It's similar, but it's not the exact same thing because of regulations in those states. So what you'll need to do is when you go to sell to people in those states, you'll have to kind of look at that. So you'll just have to read through, and you have the opportunity to do that when you send it out to the client. If it's not one of the ones that you're really well versed in, you read it over before you send it out, so that if you do get questions, you can speak in generalities. And then if the client asks you a very specific question, that's when you break out that I am legally not allowed to speak on that because I am not a licensed insurance provider. Only a licensed insurance broker can answer that question for you, but let me connect you to a licensed insurance broker. And that's when you let me bring them in on the call and you make the call for them. I never like to just pass off a customer to someone else, but I can certainly make that call for them and connect them to someone.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, I mean, you obviously have a partnership with your preferred suppliers. That seems incredibly important. I mean, it seems incredibly important for every single segment you're booking, but it seems incredibly important for travel insurance too, just because like what you mentioned, you're going to need someone to lean on when you're talking about things that are very detailed and very legal centric too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and the better, our entire business, and anybody knows this, our entire business is based on relationships. So anything to do with insurance or legal, anything is always going to be super important. I have on my emails, I have it in our registration forms, I have it anywhere that a client is going to read anything, we have that we recommend travel protection for every trip that you take. So they can never ever say that I didn't recommend travel protection. They sign off on it when they fill out the registration form. They tell me whether they want travel protection or not in the registration form when they fill it out. And then when they fill out their credit card form, it's there again. So if a client comes back to me and they cancel a trip and they didn't take the trip protection, they can never say, well, you never offered it to me. So if they lose money in the end, I can say, I offered it to you here, 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 and here, and 5 times you turned it down. So they can never, ever blame us for them losing their money.
So we have
And it's the same thing with a credit card chargeback. They can never say, okay, but I never authorized that because we have it in 5 different places. You said, how can you say that you didn't authorize this? Because 5 times you said you didn't want trip insurance.
yeah.
So it's just protecting yourself as well as the client.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat, which I'm going to get to next. But I'm curious, Heather. I was sat in a session with the Global Convention about dealing with difficult clients. Do you ever get pushback when you're notifying people 5, 6 times about travel insurance and other things?
I very rarely, and I hate getting questions like this because I feel like I have to knock on something because I feel like as soon as I answer this, I'm going to get it. It's like karma coming back. But I have very rarely gotten pushback. Most of my clients, because we've sent it so many times, I more often get the call like, look, I know that you said to take travel insurance like 5 times and we didn't, but so every once in a while we get it, but it's rare.
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, maybe the 5th time, would be the best, would be the charm.
Right.
All right, so we have a question from Frank in the chat. And again, if anyone has a question, I see another one coming in right now, please drop them in the chat. We have a little less than 15 minutes left, so hopefully we can tackle as many as we can. But Frank wants to know, is there a purchase by date for all insurance, or does it vary by provider? And does it affect the type of policy a client can purchase if it's too close to the travel date? And I know things are specific to plans, but are there any generalities you can help us with here, Heather?
They're really, generally speaking, most insurance plans, it's about 14 days before limitations kick in. Okay. So again, most of the time I can speak about my preferred suppliers. With Travel Insured, it is, I believe it's 14 days from the date that they put the deposit on the trip, then some of the limitations kick in. So pre-existing conditions won't be covered after the 14 days, and you cannot purchase the cancel for any reason rider. There's a few riders that you can't purchase after that point. With ALG's plans, you cannot do the CFAR insurance after 7 days from deposit. You can purchase it anytime in that 7-day window, provided they have not put final payment on it. So if they pay in full at the time that they book, you can't do it after that. But as long as they haven't put final payment on it within 7 days after, you can. But then you can still put an insurance on it that covers them for that delayed baggage, for accidents while they're gone, trip delay, things like that. So and that goes up until 2 days before you leave for your trip. So there is that window still that you can still add insurance. And it's the same with Travel Insured. And I believe Allianz is very similar in their coverages. So it may not be the exact same thing, but it's generally 14 to 21 days after, then those restrictions kick in. But you can buy the insurance usually right up until a few weeks before they leave.
Yeah, and again, like we mentioned at the beginning, this is like some of these specific questions are probably more appropriate for your provider or your partner. So that would be my advice. And Patricia in the chat has a question. I think this is a good one for the rest of the people in the chat. She's looking for guidance on commission protection. So hopefully someone in the chat can help Patricia. Heather, I do want to ask about gaps, and I'm not even sure if this is a relevant thing, but we spoke about third-party insurance. We spoke about supplier insurance, why you wouldn't, in what situations you would. What about situations when a client's vacation is not covered by your broker or your partner? Have you experienced any of those situations, and how have you dealt with them?
I have. I can answer some of it on commission protection too.
Yeah, go ahead.
there are several companies, ALG is one of them, that offer commission protection depending on the plan. Their voucher plan offers $200 of commission protection. Their cashback offers $100 of commission protection. And some companies, depends on the vendor, offer complete commission protection. So just check with each vendor, but a lot of them offer complete commission protection. So it just depends on which plan you have. And it is only for covered reasons, which is a big difference between ALG's is not for a covered reason, it's for any reason. And the other plans, when you're talking about like Travel Insured or Allianz, their commission protection, they might cover more of your commission, but it has to be for a covered reason. So if they don't cover your client's claim, then they're not covering your commission, and you do have to apply for that commission protection. So, and then can you repeat your other question?
Yeah,
because I
of
forgot.
course. So the situations where your broker's insurance and your broker's options and your supplier options maybe don't necessarily meet what you need them to meet to cover your client.
Yes, and we have had that situation. People will cancel for a reason that just isn't covered. I've had people that have taken out insurance, and then, like you said, I do a lot of destination weddings. And we do a good bit of bachelorette parties, things like that. One of the situations that we've run into is we had two strangers that were sharing a room, and one of them canceled and the other one got stuck with the solo traveler supplement. So they ended up paying 50% more for their trip because the other person canceled. Well, they had never met each other before the trip. And this is when we found out that a lot of insurances don't cover that, even if they have insurance. So make sure that if you're booking that type of trip, that they have that type of coverage built into that insurance policy, because it really does matter. She was not a happy camper. So we have made sure since then that whatever policy we're booking for those people when you're in a room with a stranger, that it does cover that single supplement that gets charged if it's canceled. We have also had people that have canceled because they broke up. Unless you're booking a cancel for any reason policy like those offered by ALG, and there's other, there's other vendors out there that offer that as well. But you really want to do a cancel for any reason if you're dealing with couples, or at least present those options to them. Just because they decided not to get married does not mean that that's a covered reason. In most situations, unless you booked a CFAR policy, it's not a covered reason. So, and the way that you deal with that is just say, listen, I'm really sorry. That is not a covered reason. I am more than happy to try and get you a credit. And that's where those relationships with those vendors kick in. If you have a great relationship with those vendors, a lot of times you can negotiate a credit instead of them losing the full amount.
Yeah, when you mentioned that the other day to me, it was shocking because I would never perceive that to be an issue. Losing I guess a suite mate or a roommate, and having to pay a single supplement because they took out insurance and you unfortunately did not. It does seem like the people who are building these policies must come across some very specific things that happen in the course of travel.
Yeah. And I see that Richard is saying that he always recommends cancel for any reason. And in most cases, I would agree with him. But the one place where I disagree with that is if I have put if you're booking a basic all-inclusive and it's taken you a half hour to book it, and that's fine. The problem is if you have spent 10, 12, 14, 16 hours booking this really complicated cross trek across Europe, and it's, a $25,000 trip that you're going to make, 5-figure income on. Do you really want that person to be able to cancel for any reason and you lose all of your commission, but $200? I know I don't. So we do charge planning fees and we make a little bit of money on that, but do you really want your income to go from almost $3,000 down to $500? So I kind of want my clients to have a little skin in the game on that one. So there are instances where I don't necessarily want to sell them CFAR insurance. And that is always a heated debate.
Yeah. Yeah, and Richard says he's
Yeah.
unfortunate enough not to have that happen, but it makes sense. And that was something that
Yes.
surprised me too. That was going to be my next question, what about CFAR, but it was good to get your answer about that. I mean, it just seems like you mentioned this the other day, Heather, that you want a policy that's going to cover before, during, and after travel, or all the way through the travel process. And I think that's the way to, probably the best way to think about it, especially for new advisors. You want to protect your client's investment and your time investment too, all the way through the travel process, not necessarily just when they're on their trip.
Yes, you definitely want to look, and I hate to always say you want to, it's everything is customized and individual, but it is. That's the business that we're in. It's when people ask us questions about, well, what about this and how do you train to do this and how do you train to do that? It's a really difficult business to train people to do because every single trip is different. So every single client is different. Their wish list is different. Their adventure is different. So every single insurance need is going to be a little bit different. So like I said, if it's a basic all-inclusive trip, or even if it's a 2 or 3 stop trip is different. So that's going to be a different need for the insurance as well.
All right, so I think I have one more question, and it's just tangentially related. So I hope we gave everyone a good introduction to travel insurance. I know we couldn't get super specific, and for good reason we couldn't. So I get reach out to your partners, and again, if you have any other questions, everyone knows how to reach me too. So hopefully we can do another one of these. But Heather, I wanted to sort of wrap us up with one last question. Nick mentioned price protection. I know that's a component too, but what other things can you do to just ensure that a consumer is able to have a flexible trip or have some flexibility when they're investing a lot of money in trips these days with airfare rising, with hotel rates rising? They're investing a lot of money, and they're also booking pretty far in advance. If we hear about booking windows now, there's such a wide range that people might be booking years in advance, giving enough time for things to happen. I mean, what would your advice be for consumers who want to have something in their schedule, but are really feeling that maybe they aren't being as flexible as they should be?
Well, that's probably the number one thing is we have an expression around here, pack your patience first.
Okay.
You get to the airport early, book early. That is definitely book as early as possible, especially with this trend in Europe. I've been joking around with other TA friends that if I sent everyone to Italy that wants to go to Italy right now, it's just going to fall off the face of the planet. So, I mean, booking early is a big one. I think the biggest thing for advisors right now is to properly qualify your clients into the right places, the right resorts, the right experiences, because I think a lot of clients, they book too quickly and they're working with people that are not properly qualifying them into the right experiences. And that's our job as advisors, to make sure that we're booking clients into the right hotels and resorts and experiences so that we're not booking things that they don't need or that they don't want and then changing them. So if we're not having to change those things, then we're not worrying about the price going up on things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It is interesting to hear that you have to sort of reckon with yourself that I know this time is very limited for advisors these days, but you still have to take the time to properly qualify clients.
Yes. I think people are in a hurry because availability is slim. And also, don't be afraid to say to your clients, I think, and I'm doing this in training. I have a couple of newer agents, and in training them, I'm saying, don't be afraid to be a little bit stern with clients and say, you can't take 3 days to get back to me because 3 days from now, this is not going to be here. So especially again with Europe, if I'm sending you something today, if I can hold it for 24 hours, I will.
Yeah.
But it's going to be 24 hours because 24 hours from now, it's not going to be here, or the price is going to have changed because it's going to drop out of where I have it held. So I need you to get back to me. Don't be afraid to say that. So I think that's a big part of it. And as far as just protecting their investment, I think booking out early, I think that's the biggest one. And just clients we just had this discussion in our office this morning. I think they're spending more, so they kind of expect that they're going to get more. So I think managing client expectations is the number one job that we have right now. I have never seen people on resort acting the way they are right now. In 10 years, I've never seen it the way it is right now, where they're just kind of entitled, is the best way to put it. And I had never seen that before the way that I am right now. And I think it's our job as advisors to kind of manage that expectation, that the way that you see restaurants and retail stores short-staffed here in the States, that's the way it is everywhere right now. Everybody is short-staffed and everybody is experiencing that. And if we manage those expectations before they leave, it's going to be a better experience for everyone. And we won't be dealing with the backlash when they come back. So I think that'll help as well.
Yeah. And I know we're seeing a lot of weird incidents on airplanes now too. I think that definitely has something to do with those as well.
Yeah.
But Heather, thank you so much for your time. I think that's a great way to wrap it up today. I really appreciate, again, we were just talking about time, and having someone volunteer their time is really makes us feel incredibly lucky. So thank you so much, Heather. And I really appreciate all the wisdom today too.
No problem. I am happy to come back anytime. You know that.
Yeah. So again, if you want to rewatch this session, it'll be on YouTube later tonight. You can catch Heather's old session on specifically Bachelor and Bachelorette parties, which we can get that to you as well. But thank you again to Heather. Thank you from Nick and at ALGV2 for sponsoring today's session. Thank you to all who attended, and I hope to see you all back here in a couple of weeks to talk about onboarding clients. All right.
I'll be here. Thanks.
Have a good one.